I've had a lot of videos that I wanted to bring to my YouTube channel for a long time that have just been about the general state of Honkai Star Rail. Some related to like the things like global passive, some things related to power creep, some things related to the direction they've taken with some of like the story elements. But generally speaking, I don't really talk about it very much because I just don't really have a lot of time to make the videos. But today I want to talk about power creep and sort of what's happened with HSR and have kind of an open discussion about that. I'm here on with my Twitch chat, twitch.tv/Brax, and you guys can feel free to say whatever you want in the comments as well. We'll probably be looking over it as well. So why do I want to talk about power creep? Well, throughout Honkai Star Rail's lifespan, there's been a lot of new characters released. Every single patch is like 2 new 5-stars, and sometimes once in a blue moon we get a new 4-star. I think the last 4-star that we got was Moza. Sorry, I think is how you pronounce his name. And that guy was a long ass time ago. And then before him was Gallagher. They've really slowed down the 4-star content, I think. But like looking through all these characters, I have every single character on this account because I use it for content. And as you can see, like the amount of 4-stars there are, it pales in comparison to the amount of 5-stars there are. And there's even some 5-stars down here that I just haven't leveled, right? There's a pretty big difference in the amount of 5-stars and 4-stars in the game. And that's not inherently like a super big issue, but I do think it kind of adds to the power creep problem a little bit because it makes people feel as though when a new character is stronger, they have to pull the new character because there's no other 4-star that's going to do their job at a little bit worse, which is a thing in a lot of other gacha games that you'll play. There'll be like a 4-star version of a 5-star character, and then like that'll be good enough. Whereas like I feel like because they're releasing so many 5-stars, it does kind of add to that. But anyways, the main argument that I have about this is that if you look at like 1.0 units, you have characters like Zilla, who is still one of my favorite characters in this entire game. But nobody's going to argue that hitting, 40 to 50k on a skill is like good. Right. And then like obviously with the newer support characters, the newer ones that you can like giga buff with, Remembrance MC, Robin, Tribby, characters like those, right? So like with the newer units that came out, obviously she's going to be stronger, but she's not going to be on the same level as some of the other newer units, like when you look at like Acheron, for example. And the reason is just because this character came out sooner, this character came out later, and they gave this character higher stats. Now, why is that a problem? Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, because there's no PvP in this game, technically power creep doesn't really mean anything. As long as you are able to clear the main content of the game, which it's story content, it's simulated universe, and it's endgame content. As long as you're able to clear the main content of the game and there's no PvP, power creep really doesn't mean anything. Because at the end of the day, a character being stronger than another character doesn't matter if you can still do the job. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. A lot of people will say,
okay, well, power creep doesn't exist because Zilla can still clear the beetle when the beetle's in MOC.
But there is some nuance to this, and people like to throw that out the window. People like to pretend there's no nuance to anything on the internet. But there actually is nuance to this, because you take a look at Zilla, and Zilla, yes, she can clear the beetle, but can she clear all of the content, and can she do it in a respectable amount of time? If you look at how many clears or cycles it would take Zilla to clear harder content, it's going to usually be higher, assuming it's not the beetle, than other newer characters that have been released in the game. Like if you look at Zilla versus maybe Castros or something, just as an example, right? Castros is another quantum scythe user, right? And all of the new content has been shilling out for Castros to make her feel better, but she's still a quantum character. So, I mean, obviously, if nothing else, you're at least not getting that 20% quantum res. So for the people that can still clear with Zilla, it's not really a huge deal, but it doesn't feel good to go up against like Pollux, try to pull out Zilla because, oh yeah, like, this is a boss made for Castros, who's a quantum character, so surely I should be able to beat it with Zilla, right? Taking Zilla into Pollux doesn't feel very good. And taking Zilla into any content where you can't just one-shot the ads doesn't feel very good. That's actually one of the bigger issues with Zilla that I found and that a lot of other people have found, is that Zilla, the reason she was so strong was, one, she obviously like had some of the highest multipliers when she first came out, but also another reason is that she could one-shot a lot of the ads, and if you could one-shot the ads, then you could get your resurgence window, which lets you buff and attack the boss. And something like that is a really good mechanic for her. But when the ads and when the enemies get HP inflated, when they get more HP to the point where you can't just one-shot everything anymore, then it becomes problematic for her because then half her kit doesn't work. She's kind of hot though. That's true. Yeah, thank you, Morgan Topkek. Yeah, no, you're right. 100%. Basically, all this is to say that like when a new character comes out, obviously the company wants to sell a character, and to sell the character, they make it so that that character functions very well in the new content, and it makes it so that some of the older units don't function as well in some of the newer content. Speaking of which, if you want to get any of the new characters, then I recommend checking out today's sponsor.
Topping up is expensive, and a lot of us have probably seen the numbers in the shop on our accounts and wish they weren't so high. Anything to bring those prices down would be great, and LD Shop does just that. This is LD Shop, the way to make in-game purchases on multiple titles, but with a huge discount. For example, in Star Rail, if you wanted to guarantee a character, they have their character guarantee bundle that gives you 180 pulls worth of currency, and if you're just looking to swipe in general, you can get top-ups that are usually $100 in the US for just over $77 US, which saves you over 20% of the cost. It's super easy to use, just put in your UID here and top up on LD Shop, and your top-up will appear in-game within 5 minutes. If you spend over $80, you can also get VIP status, which gives you a free supply pass in-game. If you register for LD Shop using my link, you get a 10% and 5% off coupon, which can be used to save you up to $50 off. The first top-ups that you do on the new version will actually give you double the Stellar Jades, and this also applies to LD Shop. If you top up there, you get all the same bonuses you would get in-game, but cheaper. LD Shop has been used by thousands of different players and is totally safe and reliable for top-ups. You can use my link down below to get started.
So how do they shill characters? So Pollux, if you guys don't know, Pollux is a boss where it has like a ton of resistance, basically like 90% resistance. So all of the damage that you do to the boss is reduced by 90% up until you fill up this little circle underneath its HP bar. Once it gets to 100%, Pollux vomits all over you and then starts to take regular damage again. Pollux also drain all of your HP down to 1. So not only does this character work really well for casters, but on top of like just the mechanics of the defense being absurdly high, the resistance being absurdly high, and then just disappearing and letting you just wail on it forever. On top of that, you also get your HP drained to 1, which means that Casteress gets a ton of charge towards her dragon again. So this enemy is literally made for Casteress to look good. And because of that, it makes it feel like, okay, well, if you don't pull Casteress, this is just way more difficult and it's not worth it. But at the end of the day, the other argument still stands that if you can clear this side in 5 cycles, then you can clear this side in 5 cycles. It doesn't really matter. It's gonna feel worse, but it doesn't really matter. You know, I don't think anyone is going to deny that the damage ceiling of characters has gone up. The amount of damage that characters are seeing normally throughout their functionality is much higher than it used to be. Now, a lot of that is due to new supports, but a lot of that is also just multipliers and stats. Like some characters, especially the newer HP scaling ones, I think they're pretty absurdly strong. And then Hyacinth is a good example too. This is, we were all shocked when Aventurine was coming out swinging with 20k to 50k follow-up attacks on a preservation character. We were like, oh my God, that's like a lot of damage, right? But then you have Hyacinth, who's literally doing Jinglu skill damage every single time she heals. So it's kind of ridiculous. And obviously there are team setups that she needs to heal a ton for that to happen, but it still is quite a bit of power locked behind one character that's not even a DPS character. Really puts some older units to shame. So is power creep a problem then? It kind of depends on the lens that you have, because once again, if you can clear out the content, it doesn't matter. But very clearly, there is an increase in the damage that's going out, and there is an increase, this has actually been confirmed, there is an increase in the HP pools that enemies actually have in MOC, which does, in addition to the shilling of specific bosses that work for specific characters, make it so that those characters become more necessary and older characters feel worse. If you are someone that wants to always clear endgame in a ridiculously short amount of time, then honestly, I think that we can say, yes, power creep is a problem. But I think that if you're someone that's okay clearing it 5 cycles on both sides, and you don't really feel like you need to have the newest unit every time because you can do it with your older units, then that's great. And then power creep isn't a problem, it's just present. I don't think we should deny that power creep is a thing, but I also don't think that power creep is always a problem to every single person at every single time. Now, something that worries me is seeing Hyacinth come out and seeing how much damage this character does compared to what previous sustainers were able to do. Because that was not a small jump. That was no small jump. That was a pretty big jump in damage. Pretty significant. I've seen some charts going around where people deny that damage has been going up. They say like it's been pretty much in line since Acheron. The problem is that a lot of those charts that I have seen, I don't actually have them on hand, so I can't put them on screen, but maybe you guys know what I'm talking about. The problem is with all those charts that I've seen, there's been a couple of things. One is that tend to focus on 3 target combat, which would negatively affect their addition characters. And in addition to that, they usually have a set number of cycles. And lastly, they would balance out the cost of teams. Now there's this arbitrary cost system that the community made up to assess like free-to-play friendliness. I don't really subscribe to it, but I understand functionally how it works. The problem is that some characters can use low investment teams and hit their damage ceiling, and other characters cannot use low investment teams and hit their damage ceiling. And what we should be calculating for is actually clearing content, hitting the damage ceiling, and the right amount of enemies, as opposed to a static amount of enemies and a static type of teammate. It really does feel like in that way, when you calculate it that way, it feels almost like math is being used dishonestly to prove an agenda or prove a point. And that is a big problem we have in the Star Rail community already. Yo, post-editing Brax here. I wanted to give credit to Sarah of the Abyss, or at Sarah Elise back on Twitter. They're often around the Honkai Star Rail community doing math and helping people out with that kind of stuff. But that's where I initially saw this chart that I took some issues with. This is no shade to them. I just kind of feel like it's not exactly the most accurate representation of how character scaling has been since those characters came out, especially when you consider things like front-loaded characters, back-loaded characters, the amount of cycles we're calculating for, the amount of targets. I don't really feel like there's a perfect way to calculate it, but I don't feel like this is entirely honest, at least looking at the entire game as a whole. And I can't wait for this to turn into a massive drama unnecessarily and be slandered in 70 different communities for saying this. So either way, if you take a chart and you have a certain amount of enemies and a certain amount of cycles, and you say every single character is going to fit confined to this, it's going to make every single character's power level look different. And it's not an ideal way to contest that power creep is a thing. You can see very obviously with the amount of damage that's going out with every single character that power creep is definitely a thing. It definitely exists. Now, whether or not it's a problem is completely up to you guys, because that depends on your playstyle. It depends on what you like to do. It depends on how many of these older units are appealing to you and how many of them you've really maxed out and invested in. But I do think that one thing that we can all agree on that is a big problem and definitely contributes to the power creep argument is the fact that there are not enough 4-stars coming out, and it really does make it feel like you have to pull the new 5-star, because all of these new 4-stars that have come out in the past, like Moe's felt like really good for follow-up teams when that was relevant. Gallagher has been the GOAT, but like we've just been missing that sort of like, oh, this 4-star feels really good in this team, so I don't have to worry about pulling this character. And I think that does create a new level of FOMO that is almost more threatening than just making the 5-stars do a lot of damage. So I don't know. I would like to see more 4-stars in the game personally. And yeah, like, would it be nice if the new characters were doing less damage? Yes, but also at the same time, you got to understand that a lot of people complained in Genshin that like 4-stars were the best in the game, and that they felt like every new 5-star just gets outclassed by like Shilling. So like, why would you even get the new 5-star? And I think people are going to complain either way. There's going to be people that complain if there's power creep. There's going to be people that complain if there isn't power creep. There's going to be people that are going to be upset that their characters are always doing the same amount of damage and they're always beating the end game. And there's going to be people that are complaining that their old characters can't complete the new end game. Either way, people are going to be upset about it. I don't know. They're sort of in this unwinnable situation. I think the only way Hoyoverse can really address the power creep issue, obviously they can dial back the damage every character does, but then people are going to be like, well, this character isn't worth it, so skip this character because they don't do as much damage, or they do just as much damage as the other characters, so there's no point. It is an unwinnable situation. I think the only thing they can do is introduce some more 4-stars to make it feel less like you have to pull every new 5-star that comes out, and that maybe, you know, you can get a 4-star that does a decent enough job at whatever you want them to do for your old 5-stars to feel better. That, and the other thing they're doing that's a really good thing is buffing old units, and I think they should do that. I think Jinglu is much in need of a buff, and they're doing a great job by doing that. Silverwolf as well. Silverwolf needs to be AoE. There's no reason Silverwolf is not AoE at this point. Back when we started, it was fine for Silverwolf to be single target, but Silverwolf's defense shred is pretty close to Pele's. Obviously, Silverwolf has res shred as well, and she also has like the other bugs and does a fair bit of damage. But the thing is that like Silverwolf being single target and taking a skill to implant that weakness is just like not worth it. So it's really good that Silverwolf is getting some buffs. I would like to see some buffs for other characters that have been power crept. I think Sparkle could use a little bit of buffs. I think Fushuan, I think they could be a little bit more generous with their HP, especially considering all the HP scalers that we have now. It's good to see that Blade's getting buffed. Like, there's a lot of characters that can really use it. So as long as they continue to do that, I think the player base will be satisfied. I'll personally be satisfied if they buff old units, as long as, you know, that is something that is on their plate. So TLDR, I guess, is power creep an issue? That's dependent on how you play the game. But is power creep present? Absolutely. Are they trying to do something about it? Yes. I think buffing old units is great. I wish they would add more 4-stars. I think that would help a lot. They could buff units like FGO does. It's exciting to see what they buff for players. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the way FGO does buffs is really good. I would love if they introduced a character story and then at the end of the character story, they got stronger. I really think that could be super sick. I want to say for the record, guys, I don't think adding more 4-stars solves the problem, but I think that part of the reason things feel so bad is because we don't have a lot more 4-stars. That's honestly, I really think that's like one of the biggest things, and why people feel so bad about it is that like, if every new character that comes out is like insane and there's no new 4-stars, then your only options to pull for are the next insane character, and then, oh, the next character does more damage, or you need the next character to make the next character do more damage. Like, can we make one of those needs like a 4-star character? You know, like that would be helpful. Obviously, they're not gonna make a 4-star DPS better than 5-star DPS, but like, can we make like a healer that does damage like Hyacinth, maybe does less damage that gives you like a ton of HP? Like we could use Lynx with Castris, I guess, but like it's not the same, guys. It's not. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you think power creep is an issue or if it's just present, what you guys think about it, and if you have any solutions for what they could do. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you guys in the next one, which should be like Cypher stuff. So I'm excited. Later.